So life goes on as it does, fortunately, by the grace of God. And we, I mean, I told you a little bit about, the various people who came and stayed with us and so forth. And uh, well, the fellow I'm going to tell you about didn't stay with us. Uh, he sure spent a lot of time up here, and I spent a lot of time down at his place. We met him. Well, we both met him, but it was one of these things where you meet somebody, you can just sit and talk for about 12, 13, 14 hours straight, and you just hit it off. And I met this guy down in Charlotte, North Carolina, at a house of a friend of mine who had moved down to Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife, who was going to a music school down there. She was training. She aspired to be an opera singer, and she eventually reached the level where she could go out and solo and lead in, sort of the smaller regional community, smaller city operas in various, mid-sized cities. But what she wanted was to go to New York and sing at the Metropolitan Opera. Well, she was second level. She wasn't going to be doing that. But she was good enough for the chorus, and so she ultimately ended up working in the Metropolitan Opera in the chorus. Unfortunately, she got meningococcal meningitis and died of Friedreich's Waterhouse syndrome. She was about 45, I think. Wasn't found for quite some time either. Well, that's where we met. We met this fellow down there at this guy's house, and this fellow was a piano technician and a piano rebuilder, and he'd been in Vietnam, and he's one of these guys that went out on patrol and climbed up in a tree and stayed there for about 3 days, dropping nothing. He always emphasized dropping nothing, and waited for the Viet Cong or the NVA to come along, so he could ambush him. He said it was always very demoralizing to a guy to have his buddy's head explode right next to him. Well, anyway, we got talking about stuff, and we'd go back. I was going back and forth to Charlotte fairly frequently. Well, both of us were really, and then we'd stay with Mike, and then this guy would come over and we'd talk, and so he said what he really wanted to do is he wanted to rebuild Nickelodeon pianos. The player piano. He had a specialty. His subspecialty was player pianos, and he took me over. He had a standard, legitimate, shop in Charlotte, and he worked on all sorts of pianos. He had grand pianos in there that are torn apart, and then he reset the actions and tuned them, and then he'd go out and do stuff at people's houses. So this guy certainly appeared to me as legitimate. Can you see where the story's going? I couldn't. And he said, what he wanted to do was, he says you can buy these player pianos for about $300 because nobody wants them anymore. So, but what you can do is you can get them all spiffed up and varnished and make them sound right, and because apparently they still made piano rolls for these things, the perforated paper rolls, and you can put a coin slot on them, like a Nickelodeon player piano, and you can take them to bars, and they'll put them in the bar, and the patrons can play the Nickelodeon player piano. Okay, and if anything, he could sell it to there are a lot of rich people that have more money than they know what to do with. That would maybe want one of these things for their rec room, their downstairs bar, that sort of thing, And he said, would you go in with me? Sort of front me most of the money, and I'll do the work. And then I said, yeah, I'll, I'll give it a shot. I mean, obviously not for, we'll see how it goes. If it doesn't go well, then that'll be that. But um, little did I know that he intended to move up from Charlotte and do that in my garage. Which, after a considerable amount of refurbishing of the garage on the part of moi, he did. And he didn't stay with us. He also brought up with him his live-in girlfriend and two other, how shall we say, engaging ne'er-do-wells. Well, actually, one of these engaging ne'er-do-wells was a licensed general contractor. He could find work anywhere. The other guy was the brother of the licensed contractor who had spent 5 years in South Carolina maximum prison for one armed robbery. It was some sort of theft or something. His favorite expression was "shit on my dick" or "blood on my blade." He learned that in prison. But it turned out actually both these guys were very, very decent guys. Dennis, I mean, Dennis was the contractor. He was a very, very kind guy. Blind as a bat, nearsighted as a bat. And his brother Johnny was okay. Johnny was wary, but okay. Once he got to know you, I take medicine for my blood pressure, and I always carry sort of an emergency supply in my pocket. I've got a little pill bottle I carry with me, and we were out camping. We went down South Carolina to camp for a week one time down at Santee Cooper State Park there, just outside of Charleston, and he heard my pills rattling around in my pocket, and I pulled them out just to be sure that they were okay. And he says, "Give me some of them pills, Doc." And I said, "I don't think these aren't the kind of pills I think you're talking about, John." So that was sort of the milieu there for. I think they came up here in late 1985, and somewhere around mid 1987. See, Bill had gotten an actual offer to buy. He actually made two of these pianos. He did. He worked. He rebuilt two, and several people. I'd had several people come up and look at these things, and he told them about. And he just was one of the most charming individuals in the world, and he had a couple of legitimate offers to buy one of these for $7,000, which would have more than recouped a lot of everybody's money. And he turned down the offer. And that's when it sort of occurred to me that maybe there's something going on. And then I had been renting them a place to stay. Now I had been giving him a check to give to the rental people for the place where they stayed. And turns out he wasn't paying the rent. They were going to evict him, and so he said, "Oh, you got to give me some more money." I said, well, I'll give you $1,000 more, and that's going to be it. That's it. This is going to be over. And I wrote him the check for $1,000. He says, that's not enough zeros, Doc. That's not enough zeros. Well, then of course, I knew exactly what all this had been about. Interestingly enough, Dennis and Johnny had realized this fairly early on, and they actually hitched a ride back down to Charlotte. They didn't want any part of defrauding us. It might have been because Paul took Dennis out to the optometrist and had his eyes checked and bought him a pair of glasses so the guy could see. And they didn't want to see us treated that way, so they left. It'd been nice if they'd clued me in first. Well, so that's some of the that's some of the adventures that we had while we were up here, and the early part of the early first five and a half years anyway that we were up here, and so after sort of getting shed of Bill, the old deck had started to rot, so we built the one that you sort of see now. And it's treated lumber, so. It's supposed to last 40 years, so I guess I'm good for another. I guess I'm good for another 14 years or so on the deck. I hope I'm good for a little bit longer than that. Well, that's fun. Well, even if it's not fun, you learn. So, so there it is.